Hello, my name is Agnieszka Pikulicka-Wilczewska and this is Turan Tales, a podcast about Central Asia. It delves into stories of people, politics, social change and more, and is part of my newsletter which you can support on Substack. Welcome and be my guest in the journey to Central Asia. Hi listeners! Today we're discussing a topic that has been a recurring theme over the past few years: demolitions in Uzbekistan, and in particular in Samarkand, an architectural gem, the jewel of the Silk Road, the capital of the mighty Timurid Empire, designed to impress with its blue-tiled palaces, mosques and madrasas. Ibn Battuta, who visited in 1333, called Samarkand one of the greatest and finest of cities, and most perfect of them in beauty. Alexander the Great reportedly said, "Everything that I heard about Samarkand is true. Absolutely everything. Except for one thing. It turned out to be more beautiful than I could imagine." You get me. Samarkand is a truly remarkable city. When I saw it for the first time in 2015, I thought it must be one of the most beautiful places I had been to, especially at night, when the city quiets down and majestic light envelops the Registan, the mausoleum of Amir Timur, and the Bibi Hanum Mosque, built in honor of Timur's favorite wife. But Samarkand is not only spectacular. It is also undergoing rapid and often controversial transformation. Although the city is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which requires special protection and conservation efforts, in recent months, vast sections of its historic areas, including neighborhoods inhabited by Roma communities, have been demolished. Why is one of the most precious cities in Uzbekistan undergoing such drastic change? Who is driving the process? What does UNESCO say about it? And what are the social and economic consequences of these demolitions? Joining us this week is Diora Rafieva, an Uzbek lawyer and human rights activist who has been on the front line of the fight against the destruction of Samarkand's cultural, architectural, and social heritage. Welcome to Turan Talks. Hi, Diora. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation.
Thank you, Agnieszka. Very pleased to be invited to be your guest.
So today we'll be talking about Samarkand and demolitions. Demolitions are unfortunately not a new subject or a new topic in Uzbekistan, and I covered it a couple of years ago. But what is new is that Samarkand has fallen victim to the demolitions too. So tell me, what is currently being demolished that has stirred so much controversies?
Good questions. Demolitions is not a new thing at all. And we had been having demolitions for for a long time. And it's not only Samarkand, obviously. What is the problem of this demolition is that now we're dealing with consequences, and also people are talking more and more, but also each part of Uzbekistan bring different kinds of, I would say, rights violations, but to be like more, generally speaking, the damages. So obviously, usually it's like, property rights, unfair compensations, which are general to everywhere. Forced evictions, obviously. And when we're talking about historical towns, we have this kind of, another phenomena, it's heritage destruction. So with cities like Bukhara and Samarkand and Hiva, is the heritage now become a false victim to these demolitions and I would say irregular urbanization. So what is in regards what's being demolished was recently, which got under the spotlight of international media, is some human rights organizations concerned, is the demolition on the just 700 meters away from the Registan Square, It is the main historical monument in the city center of Samarkand. I would say it's a symbol of not only Samarkand, but maybe Uzbekistan. This is the three madrasas. Just several hundred meters away, there was a decision to demolish housing. There were 10, 11 streets involved and 4 mahallas would be affected by these demolitions and what were affected in demolitions. By now, and it started in May, and in the span of several weeks, you had everything, demolished. It was very fast. It was very rapid. And it's not only housing of people, but it's also, guzars, which is like neighborhoods, traditional neighborhoods were demolished completely, There's nothing right now. And the constructions are being carried out. And this is the historical zone. Outside the historical, in the other parts of the city, there's also demolitions near the train station. Huge, large scale. Thousands of people are being forcibly evicted and houses demolished due to some modern business centers and residential building, high-story residential building. Last year, it was a Shirin business center and like a city, not only but business center and housing and everything, infrastructure, which led to demolition of some 500 houses in the suburbs of Samarkand. So it's been there, and it's a very large scale. If 7 years ago it was more chaotic, small businesses, now it's systematic and it's large scale.
That's obviously very worrying. But what also has been pointed out by a number of journalists and human rights defenders is that the areas that are being demolished were actually housed by minority groups, so Roma communities. Can you say a little bit about that and what is actually happening with those people right now?
So, yes, as I said, there are a lot of different human rights violations. So one is forced eviction. The other is heritage, cultural rights. The other is the minority issue. Samarkand because it's an old historic town, Samarkand is populated by a lot of minorities. By this Al-Matrudi demolition, recent, we have this Roma community who historically inhabited being displaced now. And this is very worrying because it was very rapid, and they were evicted. They were notified. Their procedures were very rapid and formal. They were not actually, people could use them. Official numbers say they're like 1,200, but I obviously say that is the numbers are much, much greater. Because only officially there are 217 households being evicted, and I've been monitoring the site, and the families are there huge. There are families that are 30 people or 50, even 50 people in one household. So a lot of children, very large community, and it's the only community that's centrally, inhabiting Roma. There's a Roma like out in the outskirts, but these Roma were historically living in the city on land. And they were evicted. So what it became, they were very concentrated in Samarkand. We have, we have like Tajiks in the old town. We had the Jewish community, which is only several maybe families left. And in the edge further, we had Roma. On the other side, we have Iranians. We have also, Korean settlements. So it's like a mosaic. This is the city, how Samarkand looked like, mosaic of different cultures, living more or less through centuries, like next to each other, not mixed, but next. But in some places mixed. Anyway, so now we have this Roma being, evicted, and they've been displaced. So they were giving compensation, which I believe is not just. And it's not only, I believe, it's not just. And they were giving money, so whatever, and they would say, okay, go basically wherever you want to go. And the problem with the Roma is that they live together. They don't live in Tajiks and Uzbeks, and culturally, these communities don't accept them to be living with them together. So it just never works like that. It's not that they fight, there's no violence, hostility, but it's just the way it is, they don't assimilate. So fair enough, what they did, they just had to go to suburbs of Samarkand or even to different towns, small towns, to leave, to unite, to join those Roma that are local Roma that are living there. So that brought to some tensions also. The community that was living in cities is being split, and majority of them cannot read and write. So they basically, their papers and everything, they could not go to court, they could not present their cases in court, they could not defend themselves properly. And so that is the other problem. They were really connected to the territory. So they were working in this bazaar, which is next to Registan and next to their houses. So they were living in the middle of next to Registan, in the middle of other monuments, next to bazaar. And they were working in bazaar as cleaners, as shoe repairers, as carriers. So now their livelihoods are being, not only their housing being taken away, but also their livelihood is, under very great concern. Because when they moved, 15 kilometers away from the place, from bazaar, it's just, they cannot travel back, for their work, or they have to spend a lot of money. So, yes, there's a lot of social issues that followed this eviction and demolitions. Other than heritage and other than, small historical streets being destroyed, demolished, you have the social problems that obviously not addressed right now.
Do we know exactly what is going to be built in that historical place? Because I remember Samarkand, I remember this place, and it was really a gem. It was a place that would bring us back in time to centuries back. It was really something extraordinary and unique to Central Asia and to Uzbekistan. So what is going to be built on this place?
So yes, officially they were building an Islamic center, which would be, I have some illustration, maybe I can send it later to you. It's it's two buildings, basically. One is the mosque, other is Islamic center, and some infrastructure to support mass religious tourism. So there is the Al-Maturidi grave, alleged Al-Maturidi grave. I say why alleged, because the mausoleum was built itself in the year of 2000, when they wanted to commemorate the birth of this medieval scholar of 10th century medieval scholar. So they built this small mausoleum, and there were some tombstones, and there was a cemetery there in part of this demolition site. So in 2000, they built this small mausoleum with a park. By demolishing some 40 households of majorly belonging to the Jewish local community. And then now, after 25 years, they're celebrating the 1155-year-old birthday of Al-Maturidi by demolishing, and they are constructing this Islamic center to promote this mass religious tourism, two buildings, some parking lot, a road, and maybe some supportive minor infrastructure, cleaning the toilets and visitor center. And the sizes were enormous before this all got into the media and into the UNESCO World Heritage Center. So they were about to build the minarets with the height of 37 meters each. And the minarets they're like maybe Arab and Turkish style. They're not local style of minarets, which is, typical to Samarkand of that territory. Besides, they were building something that reminds partially Timurid architecture, whereas that part of town, and Al-Maturidi himself, he is pre-Timurid epoch. So it is, it's a different epoch and very international style of Islamic architecture, which were not appropriate for that specific place. So yes, it's a religious Islamic center for mass tourism, pilgrimage place for this Al-Maturidi scholar.
And what does UNESCO say about that? And also Uzbekistan has the Foundation for the Protection of Heritage, which has been headed by Gaya Numerova and has been an advisory body to the Cabinet of Ministers, as far as I understood. So what do those institutions say about this demolition?
So first you have to know the procedure in order to say what do they say. For the government to carry out any, projects, they have to have by national law, you have to have a permission of the World Heritage Center to carry out this work. So before that, usually they don't even know what's happening. It's the duty of the government to inform them and to get their permission, but to get to have their view. So when this council decision to carry out this demolition was enacted, obviously neither World Heritage Committee, neither National Center of UNESCO Affairs did know about that. I was writing to both, and I was informing both and sending this decision. So, and I was requesting some response. Actually, this is another interesting part. I wasn't getting any official response and access any, information. And when I start writing, the next decision of Council of Deputies of Samarkand were concealed to execute the demolitions. So the first was to carry out discussions with affected communities, and the second was to actually confirm the demolition. So the first was published, and the second became unpublished. And those decisions were referring to the decision of Cabinet of Ministers. And this was concealed as well. So basically, we don't have any published legal document under which we were carrying out. A lot of things were concealed. So what did UNESCO say? They were not saying anything. They were just accepting. I was writing, and in May, the decision to demolish was carried out in second or 3rd of May, and 28th of May, there was a planned mission of UNESCO World Heritage Committee to Uzbekistan on 29th of May. Well, the first decision was in March actually, but so they came. So I was writing, and the delegation actually were informed, and they came and they visited the site officially. They were there. In May, there was still 60% was still there. I believe 50-60% of the site was still there. However, the demolitions progressed. After they were gone immediately, like the day after, the bulldozers were put back. So in July 8th or 9th, and the country has to do an impact assessment to get the permission or information. They have to send the document, and including the impact assessment, heritage impact assessment. The impact assessment was actually sent in July after the demolition was de facto being carried out. So they were sent in July. In August, there was a confirmed trip of Samarkand. There was a 43rd session of World Heritage Center, where Samarkand went, and they participated. And of course, there were no any official communication, anything on that. But obviously, there was some news that they discussed Al-Maturdi as well in this case, and they presented impact assessment. And so the impact assessment was done by the International Institute for Central Asian Studies in Samarkand. And then we had this General Assembly. So there were no official statement on Al-Maturdi from the UNESCO, from World Heritage Center, but the local government says that, they presented, and everything will be carried out upon the approval of UNESCO and all that rhetoric. But official statements, it's like that. There's some, there's visits and submissions of documents, and that's it.
If we go back a little bit, demolitions obviously have always been part of life in Uzbekistan, but especially after Shavkat Mirziyoyev came to power, Uzbekistan became this large construction site. And its architecture has also been rapidly changing. If you can say, what is the most striking difference in terms of architecture that you have seen over the past couple of years?
I would say it's like massiveness. It's huge. It's very tall, multi-layer. So they're now even building some in Samarkand, 30 floors of 30-story building. It's huge. It's rapid. I'm not an architect, but it's not pretty. It's not beautiful. It's unplanned. Obviously, we don't have a general plan. So it's basically who builds whatever they want. And there's a lot of unofficial construction, and which is not being addressed, or it is frozen because it was illegal. So it is, yes, it's not regulated. It's not pretty. More like if you say like generally speaking, and it has human right concerns regard to this and other issues we had mentioned earlier.
Can you explain how the demolitions are being organized, and what does the law say about demolitions? Because obviously it's not that the government can just knock on our doors and get us out of the house, take our house and demolish it. There is a special legal structure behind this and legal provisions. So explain to us, how does it work?
Previously, I think in the year 2017 to 2018, where this issue got my attention as a lawyer, as an activist, I would say it was what you've said. They would knock at the door. The developer would knock. I know the cases when the developer knocks at the door with a court decision and says, okay, you get out and I'll give you that amount of money. But obviously now we have a more legal, more certainty, but it doesn't mean that we have, more guarantees. In fact, we would have, I would say legally, we have less guarantees after 2022 than before that. I mean, legally, if you read the law.
So what happened in 2022? Was there any new law introduced?
Yes, they introduced the law with attempt to regulate the phenomena. Before we had the laws, and they were good, more or less good. So we were protected from, for instance, forced evictions and property seizure by private property laws. Laws on private property, they protected you 100%, in better in many other states, I would say. And constitutionally, the right of property rights were even absolute in a sense. They were very strong. Even the court order wouldn't be enough to evict you. Nevertheless, the construction boom was there. And basically these were based on the municipal decision, Hokim's decision, the mayor's decision. Mayor would give away the land which under your house, although you had title to land. You had a house and you had automatically the right to use the land. Other than the property, you had the right to use the land. So there were two rights. But Hokims were rendering decisions to take away the land because the land belonged to the states. And they were, the person of a state. And they gave away the land to the developer who wrote an appeal saying, okay, I want this land, provided the developer reimbursed the costs of the housing. So the developer would go with this decision of the mayor, say, okay, I will give you that amount. And so this decision enabled the developer to talk, even to start the conversation with the person, with the affected, the homeowner. And when the homeowners tried to resist or didn't want to talk or refused or, rebelled, they were using different methods to evict them, including filing the cases to courts. And it was very interesting. You're sitting in your home. You never did anything wrong. You didn't owe anything to anyone. You can be 100% fully law-abiding citizen. But your house happened to be in the city center, and you have this knock on the door saying, "Oh, you're being called to the court by the developer to evict you from your home," and you had to go and participate in the court proceedings. But now in 2022, a lot of international community, and journalists have been criticizing you don't have a law, you cannot evict. So the government said, okay, here's the law to seize land for public needs. And they listed what can be a public need. Under Article 4 of that law. And it was good. The definitions, there are 6 reasons, yes, and they were pretty much, logical. But what is interesting, now, the local municipality or the cabinet of ministers So now we have this mass evictions. And when this mass evictions became possible, and I would say, okay, what is the public need? I mean, now here's the religious center becoming a public need. And if you look at the definition, I mean, and I'm like, what is the public need? It doesn't say religious, cultural center or religious pilgrimage place. Obviously, it's not in the list, but it's still, public need. Interesting. Also, there was a large evictions to build a business center, Shirin, in the suburbs of Samarkand. So they said, okay, it's a business center, huge, tall buildings. And I was like, what is the public need there? And they're selling land. I mean, you can buy land on the auction there. What is the public? Is the private company can go and win the lot and buy the land. And so the road there was a public need. So they're actually getting the part of a business center and they're saying, okay, we're building a road, so this is the public need. So we are demolishing, hundreds of houses. And now there's an ongoing, huge, very sad case also of forcibly evicting near the train station of Samarkand, behind the train station. They say over 3,000 people, or even more, I believe it's much more, are being evicted. And it's a map, and there's a land, their land is already divided into lots, and people can buy, companies. So it's apparently it's also public needs, they're rebuilding. So, Or the law says there's 6 definitions, and what is the public need, and the government interprets this, or the local community, local officials, they interpret it the way they interpret it. By law, you have to have these consultations with the affected community. And I saw this short video of this consultation with the Roma, and I didn't notice any Roma there, on the officials. But although they said, oh, we've consulted, and there's some Roma says, oh, we are there. But the Roma say, when I was talking to them, that they even don't know this was the consultation. They said, we signed that, we participated in something in talks, but it wasn't, the consultations apparently were not genuine. All of them were saying, oh, we don't want to leave this, central center of Samarkand, majority at least. By law, you have to have consultation. You have to have a public need, and you have to have a fair compensation. And the fair compensation has to be by the special, independent agencies, private agencies who can determine this. Also, you have an opportunity, obviously, to appeal this decision. Whereas the poor Roma was signing a paper saying, okay, give me that amount of money, which was offered to them. And I promise not to appeal or to file complaints to court or to state bodies, which is already a violation of constitutional rights to object, governmental decisions or to file a complaint. So now there's a law, there is some, but it's very questionable implementation. Not only implementation, but even the law itself is also, I think, flawed, especially when it allows, the financing of, I have concern of financing the projects, that are supposed to be a public need, comes from other in-kind donations, That is very questionable. I mean, who is donating, how much, and either if this donator is actually, potentially is a construction company.
This is something that I wanted to ask you about, because when I covered this issue in 2018 and 19, basically, I remember that very often how it happened, it was that you would have a tender behind closed doors. So we wouldn't know that there is even a tender about a particular, area of town. Then a company that was set up a date before could, for example, win the tender for unclear reasons. And then this private company, which with no record of construction whatsoever, would basically try to negotiate with the inhabitants the eviction, basically, and compensation. So how are those tenders done today? Because you also said that, this government need and is quite questionable, because also there might be some donors that aren't necessarily governmental structures. So how are those tenders agreed these days?
I'm a lawyer, I'm an activist. I'm mostly focused on human rights aspect, and that what you're saying is also human rights. But I mostly, I focus on people, and I don't. If indirectly it comes across, I do come across about companies who are dealing with this and who are building. Usually now there's some layer of transparency. It's online. Apparently there's some discussions behind doors. I don't have any data, any research, or to address to what kind of discussions are they. And I've never been on those discussions to set them. But what I see, there's online auctioning, and companies are buying that are auctioned, although being under usage still occupied by people, right? Residents. Now they have a different terminology too. Before it was public need in 2022, or now it's renovation process, and there's no law. So they're renovating. But renovation, it's still it becomes so broad. By renovation, it's demolition and again building. So what are they doing by under those terms like благоустройство, beautification? They also use this term. For this Roma community, Almatrudi, they were using beautification, religious tourism. Now they use this renovation. So either cabinet ministers of local or local regional government decide to renovate or reconstruct or the area. So they render these decisions, and there's an e-auction website where they announce the land plots that are being sold out. So companies go and buy them.
Okay, that's interesting. That's different from when I was last researching it. So if we can go back to the Foundation for the Protection of Heritage, that is giving recommendations, right? Because that's its role to the Cabinet of Ministers. What is your opinion about their work? Have they actually managed to protect some historical sites in Uzbekistan or in Samarkand?
You have to have this body. But I would say for overall of my personal opinion, observing their work, I think there were some gains. I mean, they managed to stop some projects, and they're still freeze them. They were there. However, I think in a more systematic, in a large scale, I think they're falling behind. I think they're not doing much. I think, or anything. I mean, a little thing. I think they're too focused on ceremonial things, on event management. And that is a set part of it. We have some amazing events that have been organized by this foundation. And that is, for instance, Biennale in Bukhara, or Suzani Center in Tashkent, I suppose. There was a lady who won this support. There's some beautiful events, or some, singers coming. But they're very professionally done. They're very, maybe they're protecting heritage, Suzanne, in a sense, Biennale, drawing attention. But for me, they sometimes look very like a circus type, because when there's so much destructions going on the reality on the side, and there is they have to focus on different things, like mechanisms that enable illegal construction and demolitions. They should follow on investigating these cases, raising this case, the cases of obviously destructing of heritage, but they never ever do anything like that. So I think, yes, unfortunately, they have very limited impact on heritage protection overall. They have the ceremonial acts, and I would say, sometimes they're too ceremonial. They're too detached from the reality. This is due to the profession of the head of this organization. She's a
Gayana Umerova, right?
Yes, Gayana Umerova. She's a high, professional in making exhibitions. She started in the UK in Miltapod, and she was making, very good exhibitions. And you can tell they're very professionally done. They're seamless. But as an activist, as a lawyer, I would say this is like you cannot look at heritage through the exhibition point of view. You have to do some heavyweight lifting and some dirty work, like dealing with these corrupt practices or fraudulent mechanisms. But that's not being addressed. Only some restoration, exhibitions, pretty part, pictures, singers. And it's for me, it's a bit, ridiculous, I would say.
I mean, Uzbekistan has always liked this theater of things, right? To, put a show, to show everyone that what we have is pretty and spotless. I think that it has been the case for a long time. But what I see, unfortunately, I mean, as an observer, obviously, I'm not in Uzbekistan right now, but I think there is a lack of appreciation for history and for real historical heritage, that if something is not flashy and new and shiny, it automatically is like its value is automatically being degraded. And now the question is, I don't know if this is the lack of competence and the lack of competent people in the government and in all those foundations that are dealing with those issues, or is it just bad taste? Because as you said before, many of those new complexes, new buildings, they're just bad taste. They're either copies of something that could be built in France or in Italy or, I don't know, Dubai. Obviously, they love Dubai. Or something as hideous as the Magic City. I mean, this is probably the worst thing I've seen in my entire life, really. So I just wonder, do you think that this is something that the authorities just find pretty and find needed? Where's the source of all this?
I would say it's not either or, it's both. But apparently in the decision making and influence, and there is little competence. But it's better now, maybe sometimes it's better, but but still there is a little competence and there's so much bad taste. And I would say there are two things that are, that I'm fighting viciously. The two vicious, things that I'm addressing. It is bad taste / lack of foresight / sometimes stupidity. The second thing is that it's greed. And greed / corruptions, I think, cycles that fueling this demolitions and destructions that are running them. We have some competent people. I mean, I talk who are in the government and who understand, but they have limited power, or those organizations, institutions have limited power, or maybe sometimes I then question, maybe they're not, these people are not, they're not in the right position high enough, or maybe other forces are too strong. They silence their powers or their power, the possibilities. Unfortunately, the bad taste is sometimes they can earn this money. If it was only greed, but if they had good taste, you would say, oh, okay, I mean, who counts? But I mean, the results are, but no, I mean, it's both. So it's very sad that you're losing money, they're wasting money, and the results are, are not only human, according to human rights, or not only legal, they're just, not pretty. I mean, and what makes it sad when you talk about, because when you talk about heritage, it's the sad part of it. When it's gone, it's gone. Even if you rebuild it in the best possible way, if you rebuild this, Disney World, or it is still, Disney World, but the very good quality. It's not authentic. So that's make me really, really sad that the heritage is gone forever, and we are left with these new buildings that potentially maybe can be remodeled, but still, for today's day, they're huge, they're massive, and they're ugly.
Yeah, unfortunately, bad taste plus greed. This is a very dangerous combination. Um, but I wanted to ask you, how is Samarkand different from other areas in Uzbekistan? Because we've seen that everywhere. We've seen, demolition of historical areas in Shahrizabs, in Andijan, in Tashkent as well. So how is Samarkand different? Or is it different anyhow?
Well, okay, if you distinguish it from Tashkent, it is the UNESCO zone. So Tashkent is not the UNESCO zone. If you compare it to Bukhara, Bukhara is still better preserved than as a old town. Is better preserved than in Samarkand. There is much more to save, much more to see there because it's concentrated. The old town is concentrated in one place. In Samarkand, the territory is huge. It's bigger than in Shahrizab. It's bigger than Bukhara. In Samarkand, you have these monuments, or the heritage is dispersed. So the territory of Old Town is big. And what is unique about Samarkand, you can show every part of the regional history. So here we had Arabs, 7th, 8th century architecture. We have archaeology or old town of Afrosiyab, old Samarkand, which was demolished by Genghis Khan, invasion of Genghis Khan in 1200s. And so now we have these ruins, we have this archaeology there. Next to it, we have Timurid section where this Registan, Guramir mausoleums and other, Shahizinda mausoleums are located. Next to it, we have colonial Tsarist Russian architecture. With Armenian church, with Catholic church, with synagogue. We have one or two synagogues, but this is there. We have so we have this, with small communities of inhabiting those areas. And then we also have, which was lost. And even this colonial part is a lot of damage severely through this, for the past 25 years. So we have also Soviet brutalist architecture, modernist architecture, which is gone. Maybe we have only, mosaic here and there and some wall decorations. In maybe 20 years ago, Samarkand could present, every single this stage of regional or city in country history. And that would mean, more like tourism days. That would mean more, touristic products and trips and journeys and routes. In Tashkent, you don't have, for instance, Timurids, architecture that rich. You don't have, or in Bukhara. So that would make, or in Shahrizab, that would make Samarkand to stand out. We have this, there's a cemetery which is even in a colonial part of town, which is very interesting to walk through and to watch. So Samarkand would be something, very much more richer. But now we are left year by year after with this artificial, bad taste architecture boxes in similar boxes in all parts of this, of historical fabric of town. In Timurid part, in colonial part, in areas, same type of mosques and of buildings, and disregard to archaeology. By the way, a lot of disregard to these archaeological riches.
Hey, quick little break. Thanks for listening to Turan Tales. We're a tiny independent show supported by listeners like you. If you like our work, you can get a paid subscription at turantales.substack.com/subscribe or buymeacoffee.com/turantales. Okay, back to the episode. So tell me, what can be done to protect those historical sites? And who can do that?
It is said that there is much less to protect, and I always feel, it's so late, it's too late, but it's never too late, because as long as there is something, remnants, it's still worth protecting. It's not a job for one person or institution. I think to address these problems of, we distinguish the problems, stupidity and greed, you have to have holistic and complex approach. And so every institution has to do its job. So the prosecutor has to prosecute. The court has to judge. The local agency have to review. There's an expertise. There's state expertise who approve this every project. I mean, by law, every project have the construction has to go through them. But they close their eyes, or they do it in very nominal work. They have to work. They do to do their work. The national committee has. I mean, it has powers. It should increase their powers. It can two interesting parts. It can do. It can make suggestion to cabinet of ministers, and it also can take actions against power holders. I mean, local, who violated UNESCO rules requirements. They have these powers. They're not using them. Or UNESCO, World Heritage Center. I mean, and I've been addressing all these institutions, all the problem and by writing to these institutions. UNESCO, World Heritage Center. I mean, they admitted this, the project heritage impact assessments, although knowing how much, they're about the Roma community, about these demolitions, and it's clearly a complete violation of all their requirements. You have to notify, basically, you have to notify them before carrying out the project, but it was not the case. What can they still do? They're not to vote this Al Matrudi demolition. They can say, no, it's a violation. You violated, and take action. So, and by taking action now, I would mean putting Samarkand in danger list. And I think that would, create a huge, shockwave or whatever it is, or send a clear signal to the country rather than, the explanation, discussions, recommendation, and blah, 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 which have been carried out, ignored through years, for the past, 10, 15 years. So now a stricter measure to put Samarkand into danger list. And how you could, get to the World Heritage Center. So there was a publication of statement of UN special rapporteurs who are independent experts. So they issued a statement condemning both, but most of the World Heritage Center and also Uzbekistan of not getting. Of not making enough, of not protecting people, vulnerable groups in the historical zones, just looking at the architecture and even looking, they're not even looking at the architecture as they claim. So, so I think, yes, answering your question, it has to be not one agency, not one body who can do, and they cannot do it. And no one can carry this work alone. So I think it has everyone who are in charge of protecting, who are involved in protection of heritage, not only in Samarkand, in Bukhara, yes, but also other. They have just to perform their work, and they have to, unite and do work genuinely, not just on paper, not just on discussion tables, not like in general assemblies on the cabinets, but also on the site. But also by engaging, and engaging with experts, with lawyers and with communities. So yes, it has to be the work has to be genuine, not nominal, and the work has to be there by all stakeholders, all involved institutions and bodies.
Well, that's why people like you are so important. And thank you so much for all the work that you're doing to preserve the places that really hold an important place in my heart. And can you tell me if you have faced any pressures as a result of your activism? I'm not sure if this is something that you would like to discuss, but maybe you would like to share.
Yes, there have been some pressure. Obviously, you understand the context I work at, and I understand the context I work at, and obviously there's been pressure. This year's pressure, it's actually got me really tired. I'm really questioning whether I want to continue or not. And I was detained when I was short-term detention. When I went there to protect the Roma family who called me for help. Yes, there was several times even there was a short term, but before there was some very strict, very unpleasant interactions and conflicting situations. I had some cyber attacks, on my communications on my telephone, but still, I think I would say it's worth it. And I think this is important work that as a lawyer, as an actor, I cannot not to do it because, if I see, I live in a 19th century house myself that is passed by my great grandfather. My children are sixth generation living there. So it's not my job actually. It's just this heritage is something, it's my audacity, something that is separate. I'm a criminal lawyer, separate from my profession in a sense. But when I see this head of bulldozer, this kick, how do you say, the hand of a bulldozer over this 19th century thing, or just, the huge buildings being built, just next door, or just trees being cut down, China platan trees, are being cut down. I just physically cannot go by it, it just hurts. But yeah, so I do this and I try to be, but I try to explain, try to show, that this is actually important, that this is wrong. And, yeah, so.
I'm so sorry to hear this, but thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me and for this fascinating discussion. And all the best to you.
Oh, thank you very much for your interest, for your genuine interest. I hope we will meet in person one day. I hope you will come again into Samarkand and I can host you maybe. And see, and there's still not good places worth seeing. And I would recommend to everyone to come and see when it's still there, and to look for some gems, genuine gems.
Yeah, everyone should go to Samarkand and look at the amazing, amazing architecture that is still there. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
That's it for today. Thank you for listening, and please subscribe to Turan Tales on Substack. I look forward to meeting you there and on my newsletter's social media.